Section of the PowerPoint is only for people who were absent on Friday, or if you are in my sixth period and you missed class on Thursday. Or you can just rewatch it to get more information if you'd like. So we had already talked about the origins and the beliefs of Islam. When looking at the origins of Islam, we talked about how it started on the Arabian Peninsula, how it was founded by the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and how it's a monotheistic religion. Then we also talked about major beliefs, the 5 pillars of Islam. Pillar 1, faith. Another pillar is prayer 5 times a day. Another pillar is giving charity or giving alms, known as the zakat. Another pillar is Ramadan, the holy month of fasting. And then the last pillar was the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. And when you put all of those pillars together, you really get a sense that Islam is about fixing social inequalities and fixing corruption and making the world a better and more peaceful place. And also you see it as what Islam means, submission to Allah, really connecting to God, giving part of yourself to God, praying 5 times a day, making that pilgrimage to Mecca. Today is going to look more at the history of Islam. How did Islam spread? What were some of the political leaders for Islam? And we're also going to look at a split in the religion of Islam. So let's start by looking back at Muhammad and what happened in the rest of Muhammad's life. In 622 CE, Muhammad and his followers fled from the city of Mecca and went to a city 200 miles north named Yathrib. Now, they fled from Mecca because most people in Mecca were either merchants or people who were practicing polytheism or polytheistic religions. And the merchants really liked having Mecca be a polytheistic place because the Kaaba, the structure dedicated to polytheistic religions, was a destination for people to come and visit in Mecca. And then the merchants would sell stuff to those people and make money. They did not like that Muhammad was rejecting that polytheism and trying to preach monotheism because they didn't want to lose that trade. And so Muhammad's going to have a really hard time living in Mecca and converting people to Islam. So he's really kicked out of Mecca and he flees to a city north named Yathrib. People in Yathrib had been exposed to Judaism and Christianity, so they were used to monotheistic religions. And a lot of people in Yathrib are going to convert to Islam because they like a lot of the practices. When that happens, the city is renamed Medina, or City of the Prophet. This flight is called the Hijra, and it marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar, so 622 CE. During his time in Medina, Muhammad is going to become both a political, religious, and military leader. And this is going to really differ from Christianity because Christianity started in the Roman Empire. There was already a military, there was already a set of laws, there was already a government. Islam is going to begin in an area where it's mostly just merchants or nomadic herding tribes. So there's not really a government, there's not really a set of laws, there's not really a military. And the way that Islam builds is it's not only going to build as a religion, and it's not going to only spread like Christianity spread, it's also going to kind of be the government body, the military of that area. And it's going to build almost as an empire and a religion. This new Muslim community that we see in Medina is going to be called the Ummah, and it begins to help in the rapid spread of Islam. So you see Mecca on the Arabian Peninsula, and then Muhammad and his followers are going to flee north to Medina and gain a lot of converts. In 630 CE, Muhammad and his armies are going to march back south towards Mecca, and they're going to take it over and begin to convert people in Mecca to Islam. Muhammad is going to purge the structure, the shrine of the Kaaba, of all of its idols dedicated toward polytheistic religions, and declare it a shrine to one God, Allah. And this is why during the Hajj, Muslims will go to the Kaaba and circle it 7 times, because that's what Muhammad did when he took all the idols out of it and dedicated it to Allah. Muhammad died 2 years later in 632 CE, with 5 daughters and no successor named. An argument broke out over who should take over the role that Muhammad had. Because Muhammad was not just the religious leader, but was also the political leader and the military leader. By the time Muhammad died, Islam had pretty much had control of the entire Arabian Peninsula, and so it's this big political institution that somebody needed to take over. And a struggle broke out over who should be the caliph. The caliph means the successor to Muhammad as the political and the religious leader of the Islamic world, also known as the Islamic Caliphate. This created a split in Islam between who should take over this role. So here you see the Kaaba. So this is what Muhammad purged of all the old idols and dedicated it to Allah. And here are Muslims on the Hajj, circling the Kaaba. The split that occurred created two sects or two types of Islam. One form of Islam is called Sunni Islam. And in Sunni Islam, Muslims believe that any devout follower can be the caliph. Any follower does not have to be related to Muhammad, could have become the caliph or the successor to Muhammad. And these followers wanted a specific person, Abu Bakr, who was Muhammad's father-in-law. They wanted him to be the leader of the religion of Islam, the caliph, when Muhammad died. The first caliphs, the first three leaders after Muhammad died, were Sunni Muslims. And so it was just any devout follower who would lead the religion of Islam. Whereas Shia Muslims believed that leadership should come directly from the bloodline of Muhammad. And they wanted Ali to be the leader as soon as Muhammad died. Ali was the cousin and the son-in-law of Muhammad, so he was blood related to Muhammad. He is eventually going to become the fourth caliph in the religion of Islam, but Shia Muslims wanted him to be the first. And Shia Muslims wanted anyone who was the caliph to be blood related to Muhammad. So when looking here, this is a modern day map of the location of Sunni and Shia Muslims. Sunni is light green and Shia is dark green here. You can see regions like Iraq where there's actually been some conflict in our modern day between Sunni and Shia Muslims put together in the nation of Iraq. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, email me. I can talk to you about that. And I want to move on just quickly to a couple more historical events for the religion of Islam. The way that Islam spread, it spread through military conquest, trade, or simply because people really, really liked the beliefs of Islam, specifically the 5 pillars, the connection to God, the monotheism. The religion was really, really appealing to a lot of areas where Islam is going to spread. It also is going to spread despite mountain ranges and deserts. And one of the reasons that it spreads so well through the desert is because of those nomadic Bedouin tribes who lived on the Arabian Peninsula who converted to Islam first are going to be the ones to spread the religion. So they're very used to the desert climate. Early military successes are going to be used to take over other areas, other empires like the Byzantine Empire, and convert people to Islam that way. So Islam's going to spread rapidly into the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iran, back then it was the Persian Empire, and Central Asia by defeating a weakening Persian Empire, taking over those territories, and converting most of the people to Islam. And a lot of the people who they quote-unquote conquered, it wasn't that brutal. It was more of just, hey, your empire is weakening. We're going to take over this territory. And a lot of people actually chose to convert to Islam. Then a lot of the Islamic armies marched west and took regions like Syria or Israel and important cities like Jerusalem, and then spread throughout northern Africa. And they took a lot of that territory from the Byzantine Empire, who was also becoming weak. So if you look here, you see Islam spreading from Mecca and Medina throughout the Arabian Peninsula to the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iran, and then even further into Central Asia, all the way up until the Indus River. Then you see Islam spreading to Syria or Israel and taking the city of Jerusalem, and then spreading through northern Africa, including taking important areas like Egypt, where Carthage used to be, and then we'll look at how they spread even further later on. Motives for an Arab empire. A lot of trade, a lot of social mobility, a lot of Christians and Jews were accepted in the Islamic Empire, and just an overall expansion for the Ummah, or the Muslim community. Looking further into Islamic history, you can see the empire spreading in through all of this territory, including northern Africa and into Spain. So that's what we'll talk about now. The first dynasty, or time period of hereditary rule, political rule, in the Islamic world was led by the Umayyad dynasty, who ruled from 661 to 750 CE. They focused mostly on political expansion for the empire. They're going to want to increase the wealth of the Islamic Empire. So they're going to move the capital from Medina to Damascus in Syria. And Damascus was really connected to a lot of the trade routes at the time. So this is going to help the Islamic Empire become more wealthy. So Damascus was a prosperous center of trade already. They took that territory from the Byzantine Empire, and then they're going to make that their new capital. It's kind of like how Constantine moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople to be connected to trade. In this area, especially in the city of Jerusalem, we're going to see a lot of building projects by the Islamic Empire. And the Umayyad dynasty is famous for building a structure called the Dome of the Rock. It's famous because of its dome. It has a gold dome, and it also inside houses a rock where it's told that's where Muhammad ascended into heaven, which is sacred to Muslims. So this structure has a gold dome, use of mosaics. You see its influence from Greece, Rome, and the Byzantine Empire. And so if you look here, let's go back to the map. Here's Damascus. So they moved this capital of the Islamic world from Medina to Damascus. And then they also take the city of Jerusalem. And in the city of Jerusalem, which was already sacred to Jewish followers and Christians, they built the Dome of the Rock. This is the Dome of the Rock. So you see here's blue mosaics, here's Greek columns, here's a gold dome. And you look at this whole cityscape of Jerusalem, you can see that the Dome of the Rock really sticks out here. Under the Umayyads, Islam spread throughout the entire region of northern Africa and even into Spain. So you can see here going from northern Africa into Spain. In Spain, there was a city named Cordoba, which is the Islamic center at this time. And Cordoba, it's cool because you see a lot of European and Islamic influences in there. Muslim armies tried to expand even further into Europe. And at the time, Europe was still kind of struggling with like small kingdoms trying to rebuild after Rome fell. And so there was one specific kingdom that was settled called the Frankish kingdom that had a military that knew the Islamic armies were coming. They gathered their military, met them at the Battle of Tours. There's a city right here named Tours. And these Frankish soldiers were actually successful at pushing the Islamic armies back towards Spain. And after that, the Islamic armies never really tried to push back into Europe, but they stayed in Spain until the 1400s. So this is called the Battle of Tours. And in 732 CE, Muslim armies attempted to expand further into Europe, but they were defeated at the Battle of Tours in France, which ended the spread of Islam into Western Europe. So here you can see all of the purple territory was Christian. It was either the Byzantine Empire or it were Christian kingdoms that took over after Rome fell. And then here you see this entire territory, the rest of the colored area, was the Islamic Empire or the Islamic Caliphate. So here's some architecture that hopefully when you get back from this month vacation or however long it's going to be, we'll look at some architecture. Next dynasty was called the Abbasid dynasty. They wanted to move away from the wealth grabbing that the Umayyad dynasty had. So they moved their capital from Damascus all the way to the Fertile Crescent with a city named Baghdad, which was located in the Fertile Crescent. Baghdad became a leader of the Golden Age for the Islamic world. It became a center for learning and innovation. In the city of Baghdad, they built a library called the House of Wisdom. The library housed books from Greece, from Rome, from the Byzantine Empire, from China, from Persia, all of these ancient worlds where Muslim scholars would go and learn information and then start practicing that information. Baghdad, unfortunately, is going to fall in 1258 CE to the last Abbasid caliph, and they're going to fall to a group of invaders from Asia called the Mongols. And this effectively ends the Islamic Golden Age. And it's unfortunate because the amount of learning that was taking place, we can't even, the advancements would have been unprecedented, which I'll teach you in a little bit. So here you see them move the capital from Damascus to Baghdad. And then the Mongols are going to come all the way through here and invade Baghdad in 1258 CE. When they invade, it kind of disrupts the Islamic world. Like that whole Islamic caliphate that was built kind of fragments and breaks into different pieces. So at once they were all connected. And now because of the Mongols, they're going to fragment. And we'll talk about that history a little bit later towards the end of the course. Here's the House of Wisdom and the Mongols. Now I want you to move on even further into your notes. I believe this might even be page 6, where you see a bunch of pictures in different boxes. And as we look through each of these pictures, I just want to touch on some of the cultural achievements of the Islamic world. And under each picture, I want you to write just a little tidbit about each thing. So the world of the Islamic civilization united not just as a network of faith, but also as exchange of goods, technology, ideas, food, and it became a huge trade zone. They traded with the Mediterranean world, with the Silk Road from China, across North Africa, and throughout the Indian Ocean. Let's read this. This is a quote from Muhammad directly. He says, "Acquire knowledge. It enables its possessor to distinguish right from wrong. It lights the way to heaven. It is our friend in the desert, our society in solitude, our companion when friendless. It guides us to happiness. It sustains us in misery. It is an ornament amongst friends, an armor against enemies." So he really promoted the exchange of knowledge. And looking at architecture, Islamic architecture borrows from Greece and Rome and the Byzantine Empire, but it also has a few distinct characteristics. You see here a lot of the arches that they borrowed from Rome, they also adapted to become more of horseshoe arches with more ornate design. Right here you see what's called scalloped arches. Also, their domes are shaped a little bit differently than Roman domes. Again, they're a little bit more ornate and designed. Here you see a structure that you see in a lot of Islamic buildings where you see tall ceilings and walking under arches or columns. It makes you really look up at the design, but you also see that Greek influence of the columns. Here you see a lot of mosques are surrounded by a structure that are called minarets. And minarets are a feature that can help you distinguish that something is typically an Islamic building or a mosque. And what you'll see is you'll see people go on minarets to give the call to prayer. But again, you see a lot of cultural blending. You see Byzantine influences, Persian, Roman, and Greek influences. This is called the Blue Mosque. It's in Istanbul, which is in Turkey. Here's the interior of the Blue Mosque. It's beautiful. You see a lot of mosaics. In terms of art, I think your box says mosaic because that's what I want to focus on is Muslim mosaics. But I also want to tell you that there's no images of Allah or Muhammad because just like the Byzantines, Muslims didn't like having icons for worship. So instead, you'll see a lot of calligraphy, like beautiful handwriting. So you'll see a lot of calligraphy on discs that hang in different structures. You see a lot of mosaics. So here's calligraphy right here, and here's mosaics. So this is all broken stone, glass, or tile, which is so cool. Here's an arabesque design. And so Muslims really focused on geometric patterns in their artwork and architecture. The next important cultural contribution is the Arabic alphabet, which is going to spread to other regions as Islam spread. So a lot of regions that adopted Islam also adopted the culture of the Arab culture, including the language of Arabic. Arabic is also the language of the Quran. A lot of people also, as Islam spread and the Arab culture spread, a lot of people also took on Arabic numerals for learning. So Muslims adapted these numerals from India, including the concept of zero, and then changed them a little bit to become Arabic numerals, and then today we use Arabic numerals. These numerals were used to create a new form of math, and that math was known as algebra. And it really helped Muslims with the study of astronomy, which they loved. And it was important for a lot of Islamic practices. And this leads to them to create methods for exploration and everything like that. Really, really important for the Muslim world was a way to learn all of these new advancements. So a lot of Islamic areas built universities. This is a university in northern Africa, in the city of Timbuktu, built out of clay. And this represents the desire to get together and to learn all of these new advancements. Another really, really important contribution from the Arabic world or the Islamic world was translating texts. They loved housing books, building libraries, housing these books. They took a lot of ancient books that, if it weren't for the Islamic world, we might have lost in history. So they would take Greek and Roman books like Aristotle and Plato, and they would translate them into Arabic and then house them in libraries for people to come and study. So they really take on a lot of the ancient history and the ancient education and really not only preserve it, but they learn from it. And they even improve upon some of it. We also see important innovations in like power sources. Like the Muslim world was one of the first areas that ever used water wheels and windmills for powering different things. And then finally, the Islamic world is famous for its medical advancements. I would say that the Islamic world and China were some of the most advanced in this time period in terms of medicine. So they even had an encyclopedia on medicine to learn about different illnesses, a 14-volume book dedicated to medical practices, and you see diagnoses and treatments for diseases like hay fever, measles, smallpox, diphtheria, rabies, diabetes, cataracts, hernias, filling cavities with gold, having the first hospitals and traveling clinics, exams for doctors and pharmacies, actual pharmacies where you can go and get treated. And at this time, Europe didn't have any of this. So a lot of the advancements that Europe is eventually going to have come from either China or the Islamic world. And the last part is just that Muslims really loved two things. They loved mapping, and they had some of the most accurate maps drawn in history of the world at the time. You can see here, this is exactly Europe. And you see here the Arabian Peninsula. And they loved astronomy. So you see a lot of use of things like the astrolabe, which was a way to navigate based on the stars. And then you see a lot of astronomy towers throughout the ancient Islamic world. And that's it for Islamic contributions. So I know this is a lot, but I want you to take this down in your notes. If you don't have a notes packet, you can either print the one that I've attached, or you could have just written this, handwritten this. I'm still waiting to hear from the school how to move forward. So either way, I kind of want to finish this PowerPoint with you guys. So I'll be in touch later in the week on how we could do that.